University of Ba Sing Se Lecture number 5. In the world of Avatar, we witness the actions of two particular resistance groups, Jet's freedom fighters and the Omasho resistance. In our own world, and I'll focus particularly on the context of the Second World War, which is the inspiration for the 100-Year War in the Avatar verse. Not to be confused with the 100-Year War fought between England and France in the 14th century with Joan of Arc, the Maid of Orleans. Sorry, my French pronunciation is probably Désolé, je ne sais pas parler français. Resistance groups and partisan groups played a significant role in disrupting the war effort of both Nazi Germany, Mussolini's Italy, and Imperial Japan. What did resistance and partisan groups do? As Pipsqueak states in the episode, Jet, partisans and freedom fighters generally focus on a few simple objectives.
We've been ambushing their troops, cutting off their supply lines, and doing anything we can to mess with them.
That's what real-life partisans and resistance fighters did as well. They sometimes coordinated with the regular army and other allies to strike at enemy supply lines and cause mayhem for their occupiers. The legacy of partisans and resistance fighters in many countries are romanticized. They are revered as heroes who kept fighting during the darkest of times during enemy occupation. Just as a few examples, the Chinese guerrilla movement, no, not those kinds of guerrillas, guerrilla, and regular soldier or fighter who is generally fighting behind enemy lines. Chinese guerrillas to this day are remembered as heroes who dealt a striking blow to the Japanese imperial occupiers. Also, at the time, most of the Chinese guerrillas operating were communists, or at least communist-leaning. Just as a random thought, could you imagine Jet being a communist? Or perhaps an equalist if he had lived during the era of Republic City? Across Europe, the various resistance groups are also honored and their legacies preserved in the texts of their history. A prime example will be the French resistance and the various partisan groups throughout Europe that continue to fight against Nazi occupation. Their legacies continue to live in popular culture, history texts, films, and poems. Certainly, those who continue to fight and refuse to bend to the will of imperialistic occupiers should definitely be admired and recognized. What I want to emphasize is that history, especially in times of warfare, is never black and white. What amazed me about Avatar is that it managed to capture the moral ambiguity and nuance of these resistance groups that parallels our own world. Yes, it's great that we have vigilantes that fight the bad guys and disrupt their plans, but often, these groups also have trouble controlling themselves and are often guilty of war crimes themselves. In the episode Jet, the title character quickly reveals that he's willing to do whatever it takes to achieve his objectives, even if that means killing innocent people. He and his followers do not second-guess their decision to flood a town, which even though it would objectively disrupt Fire Nation operations in the area, it would certainly result in significant loss of civilian life. As Jet said about the old man they ambushed in that episode, he just assumed those civilians were collaborators just by association. This was a huge problem with resistance groups during the Second World War in both Europe and Asia. Both Chinese regular soldiers and guerrillas have been known to threaten, rob, and even kill other Chinese people accusing of working with the Japanese. During Operation Dragoon, during the liberation of France, which was kind of like the D-Day of southern France, the French resistance were known to have executed Wehrmacht, Gestapo, and SS prisoners even after they surrendered. The French were also known to be very liberal with accusations of collaborations with the enemy. They would embarrass those individuals in the streets and sometimes even execute accused collaborators without much of an investigation. An estimated 6,000 executions were carried out before France was liberated by both French regular troops and the French resistance. The executions of the collaborators were criticized after the war and condemned as blind vengeance. In terms of being truly in the gray area, the Yugoslav partisans probably win that award because they were known to be incredibly effective at attacking German and Italian establishments. They were also very helpful with rescuing other Allied prisoners of war and for providing support for American, British, and French airmen whom were shot down from their planes. But without going into all the details, these are a list of massacres of civilians and accused collaborators that Yugoslavian freedom fighters took part in. And those are just the large-scale ones. To conclude this, I want to commend the creators of Avatar for reminding us that war is never black and white. There may be a side that is certainly the aggressor and in the wrong, but sometimes even the good guys are capable of atrocities, and we must never forget that just because our cause is just, it doesn't make us immune from committing crimes against humanity. I also want to emphasize that resistance groups throughout history have displayed incredible courage and tenacity in the face of overwhelming odds. I do want to use this lecture and its connection to Avatar to remind us that whether we are a freedom fighter or a firebender of the Fire Nation army, it does not inherently make us the good or bad guy. It is ultimately a series of choices and decisions that determines who we are and how we will be judged by the eye of history. Thank you so much for tuning in for this episode of Ba Sing Se University Lectures. Remember, you're the best.